Welcome to the Cabin Culture Podcast, where we spend a little more time diving deeper into all the fun parts of cabin culture. I like to think of this as both the material and imagined expressions of how cabin lovers, dwellers, builders, and designers wish to live a more simple and authentic life. Today, we're diving into another thematic episode, this time with Spenser Kernea from Retreat at Fall Branch Falls. And this episode was inspired by a post on Instagram by Will Guidara, the author of Unreasonable Hospitality. And in that post, he said that hospitality is about making people feel seen. And this really struck a chord with me, and I wanted to do a thematic episode on it, and there was nobody better that I could think to do it with than Spenser. In this episode, we explore the differences between service and true hospitality. We'll talk about what it means to make guests feel truly seen and how small, intentional decisions can create unforgettable experiences. From paint colors to handwritten notes, we'll discover how thoughtful touches, not just luxury amenities, create the kind of hospitality that guests remember, alongside life's biggest moments. For anyone questioning the balance between automation and authenticity, or wondering how to create experiences that transcend the ordinary, this conversation offers both practical insights and a philosophical perspectives on what it truly means to be a host. We'll explore everything from systematic approaches to hospitality to the art of reading between the lines with guests, and why sometimes the most meaningful gestures aren't about going bigger. They're about being more thoughtful. Let's do it.
Hey, that book was awesome.
So good, right?
It was awesome. I had never read a book like that that focused so much on one industry that I'm not like related to, but the way that he talks about it, it relates so much to like everything.
I know.
Making me change the way I'm doing things at the agency.
I know. It made me think about my video business and do things differently.
Yeah. So I thought it was just so good. So good. There's so
And
many one-liners in there too.
I know, I have a bunch of them written down. I feel like he was a great storyteller who took us on a journey from
Yeah.
this like adventurous year and also taught us like a shit ton of lessons along the way.
Yeah. Yeah.
Have you signed up for his email newsletter?
No.
It's so good. It's like his thoughts once a week. I forget what it's called. And that's where I got the original quote from that made me think about this episode.
Dreamweaver. I mean, he does Dreamweaver stuff all the time.
What's Dreamweaver?
Dreamweaver. The people that made the fun hospitality
Oh,
things.
yeah.
They called those Dreamweavers, and now he's got like shirts that say Dreamweaver.
Yeah. Is that the website? I wonder where I found it. Okay. We're just going to start here. So for folks who are listening to this and don't know what we're talking about Will Guidara. Is that how I say his name? Guidara? Guidara? In
Sorry,
my
Will.
head. In my head, that's how I said it. We're talking about his book, Unreasonable Hospitality, which I honestly can't remember. Oh, I know how I found it. Someone shared with me, he did a TED Talk about unreasonable
Oh yeah.
hospitality, and someone shared it with me, and I was like, it was game changing to watch that TED Talk. So if you don't have a lot of time, start with the TED Talk, and then if you have a little bit more time, order the book, Unreasonable Hospitality. And I follow him now on Instagram because of that. And that's when I stumbled upon this post. And it looks like this if you're watching on YouTube. Oh boy. And it says, hospitality is making people feel seen. But then what he wrote underneath, I thought was so interesting. He said, hospitality and service are not the same thing. One of the best ways to determine if something is a gesture of service or hospitality is by asking yourself this question. Does doing it make the other person feel seen as an individual? And if it doesn't, it's service. If it does, it's hospitality. And that, I just saw that post and I was like, oh shit, that makes me think about everything we're doing differently, right? Or just gives different language to it.
Yeah. He has a line that's right after that in the book that he says, luxury means just giving more, but being hospitable means being more thoughtful. So
Mm,
when you put that with his post, you're like, well, I can be hospitable and not be in a super fancy place. All it means is just being a little more thoughtful than they thought I was gonna be.
yeah.
Uh,
And that's a difference when talking about high-end properties, I think. And, I always talk about the business model of the donkey, the workhorse, the unicorn. But when thinking about unicorn properties, it doesn't necessarily mean just like, oh, you're looking at 3 different beds, go for the most expensive one. Oh, you're looking at 3 different couches, get the most expensive one. That's not what it means to be a unicorn. So I think that sums it up really well. It's about how are you being really intentional about the choices that you're making.
yeah. He also, I don't want to just quote the book the whole time.
I know.
I was really excited about it. He talks about, like, he gives this magic trick that they were doing, and he says something magic. He says something like, magic is really just being more thoughtful than someone thought you were going to be. And there's magic in that. Just
Mhm.
spending way more time on something than anyone ever thought you were going to spend. And he gives so many good examples in the book. But we do that
I was
often.
just gonna say, let's talk about at
Yeah,
cabins.
we do that often on our guest check-in. So we ask for, we've got the name of the person that's coming, but who they're coming with. And then sometimes you stalk them a little bit and try to figure out why they're coming. And you can ask, but it's also a little more fun to stalk and, see what they like. And if they have a birthday or something like that, it's fun to include that in our handwritten letter that we give them. And really, I think that handwritten letter is like the secret. And yes, it takes a lot of time, and it takes, you might say, an unreasonable amount of time to sit down. We do it once a month. I say we, like I do it. Marcy does it. To sit down once a month, one evening with a glass of wine and look at all your people that are coming for the next 4 weeks and see if they've given reasons why they're coming, and to write them a custom handwritten note and to seal it up and put a wax seal on it and like write their name in cursive on it and almost like be like, I hope you have a great stay. Like, blessings on you when you come. Like almost that like intentional, thoughtful moment is important. And I don't know, they probably open it up and be like, yeah, whatever, great letter, onward and onward. Uh, but for us, I think there's a little bit of magic in
Yeah.
that little card.
Yeah. Even if some people do that, some of them will sit there and really sit with it, and it will set the tone for the whole stay. My question for you, because I think a lot of people ask this, and my cleaner writes handwritten notes, and I will type them to her on our
Yeah,
platform,
that's
and she'll
perfect. Yeah,
write them out.
yeah,
Wha and But the question I have for you, and this was a question I was gonna ask later, but we're gonna go to it right now, is how do you find out the details in a non-creepy way? Like, if we want to customize and be really thoughtful about our hospitality, step 1 is seeing that individual genuinely and getting to know them, and how do we do that when so many of us are hosting from a distance and literally only ever interact via technology?
yeah. About a third of guests say why they're coming in their first, like, hey, we're coming for a birthday. Uh,
Yep.
so 2/3 don't, but we always send a note about a month before check-in that says something like, hey, we're trying to customize your check-in details. Can you tell us the name of the person you're coming with?
Mm,
And
okay.
that starts, sometimes they'll just go, it's Janice, and they'll send a one word response. And sometimes they'll say, it's my husband and we're celebrating our anniversary. And if you just say, I'm customizing your check-in information, I don't
I
think that
like that.
feels super creepy.
No, I like that a lot, and that the fact that most people, you're right, some of them will give you just the name. All you're asking for is the name, but
Right.
most people will naturally wanna tell you more, not just the name, but, like, what it is that they're coming for.
Yeah.
Yeah, we ask them in our initial one to tell us if they're celebrating anything. But I think still, so we hear that from some folks, but I genuinely don't know when I don't know. So if they don't tell us and they're celebrating something, there's no way to know. And then the second thing I ask them to do is we tell them about the Instagram account in that first message.
Yeah.
And we encourage them to say hi to us over on Instagram, which doesn't happen all the time, but some of them do. They'll just pop an Instagram, they'll send us a DM, and then I immediately follow them back. Anytime I can identify someone who was a past guest or an upcoming guest,
Right.
I will
Yeah.
always follow them back. I didn't always used to do that though. I
Yeah.
don't think I understood the value of it before, but now we just had this past weekend guest who was coming for a second stay, this time with his dad. And because I followed him and his husband after their first stay, I've been able to follow their entire cabin journey. They bought land in Sullivan, Maine. They're working on their own cabin. I know their dog's name. Like, I know all of these things about them because they're active on social media, which allowed me to create a custom gift bag for them. And that all that came from was just following them back from their initial stay. And
So
then
you
my
think,
cleaner sent me a picture of like a hand wrapped gift that they left me. It's just like building that relationship more.
yeah, that is, we have guests like that have stayed with us 2 and 3 times, that, you begin to develop that relationship, and it's definitely easier once they've been once or twice, and you can
Yeah.
have that conversation. And I think Instagram's great for that too. It feels a little less formal.
Yeah.
And um, Airbnb, in their message, you actually can't say Instagram. They don't want those conversations happening outside of that. So you got to get a little
Although
sleuthy.
I do say that in mine and they've never flagged it.
They flag it. If we say Instagram, they'll flag
Well,
it.
I
If
don't say that. I say IG.
IG, you can get away with. Insta, I think you
Hmm.
can still get away with.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So guest notes, I feel like I'm not trying to, I think the way that you do yours are more intentional, but it seems like something that a lot of people have talked about. Do you have
Yes.
one more example of something where it's not necessarily more expensive, but it's more thoughtful than what they would find at most
If
places?
yeah, if well, this is like a uh, what do you call it? If something's going wrong, you try to fix it in a way that's maybe a little over the top. If something happens at check-in or during their stay that's unexpected, like the power goes out,
Mhm.
we often try to give them something in return for that, and that's either uh, like a reservation at one of the nicer restaurants in town, and sometimes we'll pick up like $50 worth of that, or we'll give them
I
a
like that.
a buy one get one free gift card that we have on hand from a restaurant called Black Sheep. Shout out, they're great. But get some gift cards and just have them stashed somewhere, either in the cabin or like somewhere the cleaning person can access, so that you can give some of those out and just have them on hand, so it doesn't take any extra time or
Yeah.
thought.
Yeah. I like that. I like that. I think the other one that comes to mind at our cabin, I'm really trying to push myself to think beyond to really push the thoughtful piece. And I think maybe this is an obvious one, but I think our bookshelf, not the existence of the bookshelf, but specifically that we asked Instagram followers to write a 3 to 4 sentence recommendation for the book, which then is in our guest book. So that if you're trying to, because if you look at a big bookshelf, how do you know what to read?
Yeah,
But if you have like 30 recommendations in the guest book, that you can quickly flip through that can help you to quickly find a book that you like. I think that's an example of something that didn't cost a lot of money.
yeah.
It's not about pouring money into it.
I think that's the most important thing. Like, our cabin didn't cost a fortune to build, but every decision we made was thoughtful.
Yeah.
And it's almost like we created the experience that we wanted to have, rather than trying to recreate something that someone else created.
Yeah.
And I wrote down back to the book, one of Will's statements, and he's talking about a restaurant. He says, he's using the word serve because he's a server. Serve only what you want to serve and you're showing off. Serve only what you think other people want and you're pandering. Serve
Oh,
what you genuinely want to receive, and there's authenticity in the experience. And I think that is like spot on. Creating a great cabin or a whole cabin experience is not creating what everyone else has done with the exact same amenities that everyone else has, that you can just go either buy
right.
or duplicate. It's, I want to create the experience that I want to have when I go to this cabin. Authentically, genuinely, this is the experience that I would like to have.
Yeah.
And that is, now I've got a unique and genuine thing that only I have.
Yeah. Which is something I've heard lots of people on the podcast, we've gone back and forth grappling with because you want it to be the best. And sometimes we all have blind spots, right? So it's like this fear of like, what if I'm not including something that's the best? But really what he's saying is like, just think about what you would want. When you go to a cabin, what do you want? That's
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah. And one of the decisions that we made is we don't have fast internet. We have 1 meg internet speed, and it is just enough for a text message or to check the weather. It's not enough to stream Netflix.
Yeah.
I had a guest this weekend tell me, she's like, "Oh yeah, we're planning on sitting around the cabin and watching college football all weekend." And I said, "Not at our cabin. You're not. You're." And I know this person close. And I said, "Not at the cabin. Maybe you can go to the bar down the road and watch football, but we don't have football at the cabin. That's kind of not its intention.
Yeah.
It's to sit and to be still and to have the conversations. And instead of doing that, maybe you're sitting by the fireplace."
Yeah.
So that's a hard decision to make, because some people won't visit our cabin because we
Because of it. Yeah.
don't have that. But other people will only visit a cabin in the woods that doesn't have all the distractions that fast internet brings.
And then what about the people who plan to come assuming that you're going to have that and then you don't? And maybe there's that initial disappointment, but possibly at the end of it, they like you actually gave them a gift that they
Yeah,
didn't realize initially was a gift. Because I had someone write in our guest book once and said we stayed up late reading books out loud to one another in front of the fire. Now we do have internet, so that was a choice on their part. I
yeah,
can't take
that's good.
credit for that.
Yeah,
But at your place, I can see that happening by accident. When we went to the cabin in New Zealand and had no Wi-Fi and it was dark at like 7 p.m., literally I was bored. I was like, "Sean, what are we going to do?" And he didn't bring a book, so we ended up reading my book out loud to one another. And now we will do that sometimes at home, and that was a gift that they gave us, not intentionally, but by taking something away
yeah,
rather than pandering based on what they assumed that you would want.
yeah. That probably became one of your favorite moments, or at least a
Yeah.
moment that you talk about. And in the moment was probably frustrating, but now you remember with like a reverie almost.
Yeah. Yeah, because it's not something you're experiencing normal. I can't stop thinking about calling it pandering because now I'm like, where am I pandering? Right? It's making me rethink some of my
Yeah,
choices in that language, which is like, I feel called out in a good way, though,
yeah,
of like pushing me closer towards being really intentional.
yeah.
He said at the beginning, and I like this because I like to think that we're intentional, but I also think there's always room for growth. And he said, intention means every decision from the most obviously significant to the seemingly mundane matters. I think it would be interesting to hear from you maybe the most significant intentional decision you made with your cabin and the most seemingly mundane decision you've made at your cabin.
Okay, so the most intentional, we said when we started out at the cabin, in our mission statement, we are a place for two people. And it shaped everything that we did. One or two people, no more than two. Uh, it then shaped literally every decision that we made, was creating an experience for a single person or a couple to reconnect with each other and with nature. And that helped guide the decision making process for us. And so that was probably the single biggest one. And we have
Mhm.
kids, we have people all the time that say, "Hey, can I bring my kids?" Or it's me and my two sisters. Can three of us come? And we're like, "Hey, the couch isn't big enough to sleep on, and it's a queen size bed. You're
You're not
probably
gonna be happy. That's not what it's for.
not going to be happy here." I
Yeah.
got lots of cabins in the area that I can recommend. Um, and that was a big decision to make.
Yeah.
Cut off a lot of people and a lot of potential guests when you
Yeah.
make those hard decisions. And a mundane one, we intentionally didn't put a TV in the living room. I don't know if that's, we have a TV like with a DVD player,
It's too
but
big. Spencer, that was gonna be my big intentional one. I have to think bigger now, but think even smaller
okay.
than a TV or very mundane. Okay, I'll do my mundane one first because
Okay.
that's the one I know, and
See if
the
that
big
triggers
one.
something for me.
Yeah. So I, as many people listening to this will know, am obsessed with lighting because I think that lighting sets the mood for everything. And so some of the decisions I made around lighting were bigger ones, actual fixtures, even the light bulbs, I would argue are a larger decision that we should be really intentional about. But to get really mundane, I literally have spent the last 3 years obsessing over how to get the vibes right at night. During the day is no problem, at night in the cabin. And so I have now, this last visit, I think I got them right for the first time. So I haven't done this yet, but what I'm going to do is Sharpie every single light switch in the cabin with a little black dot, because we also have added dimmers to like 3 of them because I couldn't get it quite right. It was either too light or too, so I had Sean put dimmers in. But then people need to know with a dimmer where it should be for the perfect vibes. They might not agree with me, but I actually feel like that is such a small thing, but I think it has such a really big impact on how the space feels at night. That
Yeah,
feels very mundane to me.
you could brand that like the Janice lighting. You got to
That's what
be
I'm gonna tell them. I'm gonna put it in the book. This isn't
right.
the right way, but this is my recommendation.
That's awesome. What's your really big one besides the TV? You got to come up with something else now.
I know, because that's not big enough. I realize that. I'm trying to think at the very beginning of the build. And it's so interesting, Spencer. And this is why I wanted to have this conversation with you, because I think you can push me a little bit in this. I think I had rentals before, right? So there is the business side of my brain going into this one. This was my third, I think. Um, and so I wanted it to be for couples, and it is for couples, but I added in the extra bed. I really want the loft to be a sitting area, but I put a bed in because then 4 people can come. Our market gets bigger, right? These were all business decisions that I think detract and sometimes lead to unhappiness if they come with 4 and then they're like, "Oh, there's not enough seating for 4." And I'm like, "Well, it's not meant for 4." But wait a minute, Janice, you put a bed in. You told them it was meant for 4 by putting a second bed in there.
Yeah.
So that push, I think that big decision on your part cannot be overstated how important and how hard that is to do when you're also running a business. Um, I think, oh man, like location and cabin design were both really, really important. When looking for the right piece of land, I would get out and I would listen. And there was one that was great location, great, and it was close enough that you could in the distance hear the highway. And I was like, nope, can't do it. And that's like a small thing, but like makes a big difference, I
I
think.
don't know that there's a bigger one. We bought land 2 years ago to potentially do something with, and after buying it, we just couldn't get past that. You could hear the interstate,
Yeah.
and it was beautiful. It had a sunrise view and a sunset view, and it was amazing. But you could hear the interstate, and we just couldn't get past it. And so we ended up just turning around and selling it a year later. Um, so I think that's a huge one, Janice, on
Yeah.
location, and is it the right distance from whatever it is you're trying to get to? Is it the right audio? Is it the right smell? Is it the right temperature?
Yeah.
All of that stuff. What are your neighbors like? Do they have
Yep.
roosters? Do they have barking dogs? All of that. When
Yes.
you're trying to create an experience that's intentional,
All of
those
that
are,
matters.
those are big decisions.
And it's hard to figure them all out ahead of time. I remember during the build once we were staying in a tent on the land. This was the weekend we cleared the land, I think, and I heard a barking dog like all night and I panicked. Cuz at
Yeah,
this point we had cleared half the land and I was just like, "Oh my god, is this every night?" I didn't know yet, right? Turns out it wasn't, and we don't have an issue with barking dogs. But in that moment, it felt that significant to me that this whole investment and the whole plan could go down the drains because of a barking dog.
because of the two chihuahuas next door.
That's right. Don't blame the
And I say
chihuahuas, blame
chihuahua
Lucy,
because I know you have a chihuahua. That's why I said that.
who's whining at the door like 2 minutes ago, so appropriate. She's
Hey,
literally
here's a
shouting.
here's a small one, and I don't know. I don't. Maybe this is not small enough. Uh, we spent a lot of time fretting over the paint color in the bedroom, and specifically the trim paint color in the bedroom,
Okay, tell me more.
because it's such a small room. We can't fit a king size bed in that room. Like our whole space is 440 square feet of interior space, so we're constrained anyway. And when we designed the bedroom, we put 10-foot ceilings in all of the downstairs. So it feels fairly small, but with a really high ceiling.
Yeah,
And you can do a lot with paint color in a small area.
yeah.
So we actually painted the floor trim, the wall, and the ceiling trim all the same color.
To make it even
And
taller?
to make it even taller, just to try to get past these like horizontal lines in the room And I can't tell you how much it adds to the coziness of that room.
Yeah.
It's like you walk in that room and there's no distraction floor to ceiling on the walls. It's just the color and the artwork. And it just gives it a different level of coziness.
Yeah.
The back of the door is painted that way. The closet door is painted the same color. So it's just like this monochromatic room that just feels cozy. And I don't know if you just were to paint it, paint the trim white and the walls of beige. Obviously, it's not going to give you that same intentional, cozy feeling.
Yeah, that counts. And I feel like emphasizes for a lot of us the value of an interior designer because
Oh
I don't have that skill set. And there were countless moments during the build when she would be helping me with paint colors or things like that, or where to put the curtains. And something she would say, I'd be like, that is clearly a blind spot of mine. I would have fucked that up. Not out of like not wanting people to have a great experience, but I don't have the skill set to do that. Yeah, that's a good one.
We have good friends that are really great, and Marcy's got a great eye for it. And then
There you
she
go.
and the girls go talk and they come up with the idea. So
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, I want to talk about the places. So these a lot of the things we just talked about were one-off choices. So I want to talk about hospitality and I want to talk about more one-off choices that we've made along the way, but I also want to talk about where we build it into our systems because I do think that sometimes there's unsexy things that aren't, in the book he gives examples of grand gestures that he does for
yeah,
guests, right? Which are like awesome and inspiring. But I also think sometimes building consistency and small things into our systems that ensure a good experience can actually go a long way too. And you mentioned your handwritten note, which I think is one, and we have welcome notes as well. What are some other things that are built into your systems that just guarantee it happens every time for every guest, every visit?
we stock snacks and we stock drinks and we stock champagne and we stock wine. And not every guest gets wine and champagne.
Yeah.
If there's special occasions, they do. And you have to stock it all on hand and
Yeah.
just have it ready to go. Uh, part of part of what I would encourage guests to think of, or hosts to think about, is how can I make it really easy to do a kind gesture? How can I make it really easy to be thoughtful? And I
Hmm.
gave the example of like the buy one, get one free or free appetizer thing that restaurants will give you. You go to your favorite restaurant, say, I have an Airbnb. Do you have any things I can give my guests when they check in or whatever? And some of them will have those on hand ready to give out. That's a systemized process
Yeah.
that makes it super easy to do nice things.
Yeah.
um, Stocking snacks, like your favorite snacks, not crappy snacks, make them good.
It does
And
have a big impact. I stayed at the Shack in Basie, Virginia, and I think this was at Little Mountain A-Frame in Old Fort,
she
and
has great snacks.
and
Yeah.
she had Reese's peanut butter cups, which is such a guilty pleasure for me, but I can't keep them at home. I'll eat all of them, right? And when we opened that pantry and saw Reese's peanut butter cups, I cannot tell you what an impact that had on the mood that night.
Okay. We'll have to ask Sheely. Do you think she knew you liked Reese's peanut butter cups and
No.
intentionally did that for you?
No, how would she have known? I mean, kudos to her if she knew. It felt just like but even I didn't even care. I did not even care if she did it just for me or it was there for everyone. I don't think that changed the impact for me at all. If it had been some like haichu, a Japanese candy that I loved when I lived in Tokyo, if it had been that, I would have been like,
What?
how
Yeah.
right. But I don't think it changed the impact. Just having it there and the existence of it there was like a joyful moment in the evening.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
so
like
snacks can't go understated, and we still don't do snacks. We do snacks in our gift bag, but I need to do more snacks. That's a good
just get
reminder.
a big bucket and or like a really cute wooden tray and just fill that thing up.
Yeah.
All your favorites. You got to write down all your favorite snacks. Get like a proteiny one, a starchy one, a sweet one. Pack them in there, Janice. It costs so little
Right.
to do that.
And the impact.
It's huge.
Yeah. Yeah, that's good.
Little, I think creamers. We drink our coffee black, but we found they have these milks that you don't have to refrigerate, but they look like milk. I think we get them at Trader Joe's. Uh, and we started stocking those because apparently people like having something other than just black coffee.
Yeah.
But that's an intentional one.
And creamer often has to be refrigerated. Like, at least ours at home, we like creamer in ours, and so we often don't travel with it. So then you have to buy a whole thing of creamer when you're there.
Yeah. So we leave those milks in the fridge,
Okay.
but because they're pasteurized, they last a little longer
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
traditional. So those are good ones.
Yeah. If you're dreaming about a cabin build, or are in the midst of a build, or you just bought a place and are getting ready to host for the very first time, regardless of where you are, sometimes you just need a little help along the way. Shared experiences from someone who's been there, advice from someone who's learned a lot of lessons the hard way. That's me. Or a cheerleader as you finish up. All of these reasons are exactly why I started offering cabin consultations to our Instagram followers and friends who could use some specific one-on-one help. I can't promise to solve all your problems, but I can promise to be transparent about our build costs and process, our organization and project management systems, our favorite and least favorite tools for renting, how we market, and how we found ourselves with almost 80,000 Instagram followers and 100% occupancy in our first year of hosting at Cozy Rock. So if that sounds like it might help you, feel free to visit us at staycozycabin.com or on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin and sign up for a time to chat there. Yeah. Any big ones? What are some examples, not automated, but like one-off things that you've been able to do for guests, more akin to the hot dog cart that he referenced in the book or something like that?
If you're having a birthday and you're coming to the cabin, I can't promise you this will happen, but we have had probably a dozen or so. We made friends with a bakery, and she makes these unbelievable cakes. I mean, I'm talking like they're pretty expensive. They're like $60 or $70 for a cake. So like it doesn't happen all the time,
Right. It can't.
but they're like 2 stories tall. And if you're just listening, it's like 18, 20 inches tall, and they're custom handwritten, like with icing on it, like happy birthday for the person. And it's got all these florally rhododendron type designs on
Wow.
them, and it matches our cabin. Those are like mind-blowing moments when you
Yeah.
walk in, you're like, oh my gosh, it's a huge cake. And it is a little expensive, but it feels so much more expensive than what you're actually paying for it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the thing about a unicorn property, right? If you're doing these things consistently, not the cake, but just all these other things, you can have a higher price point. What comes with that are higher expectations. So you do have to consistently deliver. But with the higher price point, often comes more profit margins. And so then I don't think twice. If I'm splurging on $100 extra gift for a repeat guest to
Yeah.
customize their stay, I don't blink. It's like you don't think about it, and it's really fun to get to do those things. What did he say in the book? And this really
I was about
resonated.
to say, we're about to talk about the book again
I know.
because
He
he's
said he said hospitality is a selfish pleasure. It feels great to make other people feel good. And I read that and I was like, "Yep." Because when you do something like that, I had one guest one time, and I don't know how I found out she had just gone through a breakup. I don't know if she told me in a DM or I saw it on her Instagram. I think she might have said like, "It was going to be two of us. It's just going to be me, but I really think this is going to be exactly what I needed." And I was up there before her. So I got to put together, I do custom bags with
you
LL
sent
Bean.
her a Tinder date, Janice, without her knowing about it.
Okay, that would border on creepy.
That
But
would
then
don't do
what
that.
if it
Don't do
was like her soulmate? You never know. I didn't quite go that far.
that.
But
Okay,
I
good.
did. I have been through breakups, and so I have some favorite things that I like to do during breakups. And so I custom did an LL Bean bag with some of my favorite book that I use, my favorite journal, my favorite crystals, like even, and I said in the note card, I said these things might not be what you need. It's hard to know what everyone needs, but these are things that have helped me in the past. And regardless of whether she thinks crystals have magical healing properties or not, it's again about being seen, right? You have to feel seen in that moment of someone acknowledging not just that you went through a breakup, but that breakups are really hard and you are probably sensitive right now and your heart could use something a little bit extra, you know?
Yeah.
And but
Someone spent time
selfishly,
on me.
what's that?
She's thinking someone spent time thinking about me, and I
Yeah.
think that's the key thing to think about.
Yeah. Is that you feel seen. That's what I thought about when I did that one, was just like wanting her to feel seen in a painful moment. Because often people ask, "How are you?" And we all say, "Oh, we're okay." Okay means bad, right? Like, we're either good or we're okay. Because it's
Yeah.
really hard to say out loud, like, "I'm actually, like, I'm really
That's
fragile right
hard
now."
right now. Yeah.
It's hard to say that, and so if we can get a hint of that from someone, that message to me felt like a hint of, "I'm actually not okay right now."
Yeah.
If we can take those hints, hospitality or just our life with family and friends, and take them and make them feel seen for that, I feel like, but what what I'm saying is I loved doing that for her. So there
Yeah.
is an element of selfishness in hospitality, because it does feel good to be able to see other people, I think.
There's one more on systemizing, and maybe this isn't systemizing, but it's having the right team. Getting your cleaning partner, housekeeping partner, whoever on board with
Yeah.
what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
If you're like, look, this is about a guest experience for them, and we are trying to create this thing, and this isn't your everyday retreat. This is what we're trying to do. Can you help us do that? And then pay them really well for doing that. It's their job.
Yeah.
That makes all the difference in the world. Now they have some mission in what they're
Yeah.
doing.
How
And
did you do that with yours? How did you get them on
we
board?
had, she reached out to us. Our cleaning person has
Mm.
been the same cleaning person for the last 3.5 years. And when we first started our build, she's amazing. She's wonderful. When we first started our build, she reached out to us on Instagram and said, "Hey, I hiked past your cabin. I've been hiking this trail for my entire life. I want to be your cleaning person." So we met with her in person and we explained just what I said. Here's what we're trying to do. This isn't your everyday cabin. This is the experience
Mm.
that we're trying to create. It needs to feel like this. Details matter. This is what we're trying to create for people. And she was like, "I'm on board. This is exactly what I want to be doing. This is why I clean." And like, she's been amazing since day one. And she'll go, we live an hour and a half away, and she'll sometimes go pick up, specific fun supplies for guests that we're like, "Can you run to the store and get this kind of thing?" You pay her for it,
Right.
but she's open and willing and is always happy to help create that
Yeah.
experience.
I almost feel like it's impossible to do this unless you're on site or next door. It's almost impossible to host with Unreasonable Hospitality without someone like that. Because I
Yeah.
also have an incredible cleaner, and I found her on Craigslist. And part of it was in the posting. I said I was looking for someone who was interested in heart forward hosting, cared about those
Yeah.
details. And she's not a cleaner, she's an artist, and just was looking at that time for some additional work, and has been with us for over 3 years now, and is also just like a good friend. I love her. But I think so finding the right person who already has, I think she had that in her already. She loves
Yeah.
gardening and will put together flowers for our guests, things like that. But then I also think just by modeling it, just, and I wasn't even intentionally doing this, but when I did some of those things like that custom gift bag or some other things for guests, well, she had to put it out. She wrote the handwritten note. So she was starting to see. And I think it made her think, like, oh, there's other stuff we could do here. And now she's coming up with her own ideas of stuff we can do, right? Because that's
So
rewarding for her too and makes it more fun. So I do think it's about the right fit, but I also think it's just about showing what this looks like to host intentionally and try and see people when they're coming.
Will Guidara would call that dream weaving.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's the word he uses in the book.
It does feel hard, and I don't envy him at all, because the thing about the cabin space is we do build teams, but most of us build very small teams. It's a
Mm.
handful of people. For me, it's like it's Tammy, our caretaker, it's our hot tub cleaner, it's our snow removal crew, right? And they're all only
Yeah, it's
there
yeah,
occasionally.
it's your handyman too. Yeah,
Well, he's my husband, so he's kind of naturally
can't drop everything and fly up there or drive up there every time.
not
Sure.
well, but we're only 3 years in, so we haven't had to hire another handyman yet. I'm sure the day will come. But yeah, it still is like a small team and only a little bit. And I don't know if that makes it easier or harder to do this, because if you're with them every day, you can build a culture around it. If they're only coming to do snow removal whenever there's a storm, it's harder to invest them in that, I think.
Yeah, agreed. That's tough. If they're there once a year, it's harder to get them to acknowledge they shouldn't be there removing snow while the guest is there, or be there removing whatever, treating the place for bugs or, whatever it is
Right.
while the guest is there. Hey, I want to mention one other thing. I thought
Yeah.
this was going to go earlier, and it's about the way that Will approached doing big extravagant things. He talks about how he systemizes 95% of his income, and that's the handwritten notes, the bag of coffee in your gift bag, the make sure that the business can support that. 95% of it is covered, but that last 5% is like, I'm going to take that and I'm going to go splurge with that. Like someone's
Yeah.
getting $100 cake and $100 bottle of champagne, and I'm going to spend more on them than they spent with us.
Yeah.
And that is such a fun thing. If you've already got 5% and you're like, I know I'm going to spend this much money with my Dreamweaver fund, blessing people, doing whatever, creating amazing experiences. Having that you can guilt free go be like,
Yes.
here's date night on us, $200, go have a blast.
Yeah.
Um, that is super fun and is something that I think everybody should do. And it's relative to the size of your cabin. Make it
Right.
5%.
Right. Figure out what's doable for you.
Yeah.
But it is fun because we do that. And I've really started pouring into repeat guests. Though now we have several 4-time repeat guests coming up in the next couple months. And so each time I'm trying to go bigger and trying to figure out, okay, what's next to like continue to delight them at that point. But when you have that fund set aside and you just know that everything else is going to pay for that, it doesn't feel like you're spending money. To me, it doesn't feel like I'm losing money doing that. And it
Right.
is the most fun part of hosting, I think. And then hearing from them when they get there and are delighted by it.
Yeah. You just created like an awesome lifetime legacy moment for that person.
Yeah. And I think about the amount of Airbnbs I've stayed at over the years, and I've never once had that happen. I've had small delights, don't get me wrong, and those
Yeah.
Reese's peanut butter cups were great. And Julie at the Shack has Christmas tree ornaments, which I happen to collect. So that was
Yeah.
a delight, right? So I've had lots of those, but the real over the top, someone going out of their way to see you and acknowledge you, that you
Yeah.
had choices of other places to stay and you stayed there, that does not happen very often. So we have to think about what that means to guests when they've never had that happen before,
Yeah.
potentially.
Yeah.
So
Or
hopefully.
it's very rare. And then you create this like a legacy point in time where it's like, it's the day I got engaged. It's
Yeah.
the dinner after my wedding, and maybe the experience I had when my firstborn took their first steps. And then it's when I went to Cozy Rock,
Right.
and had that legacy moment. That is so cool to think about.
Yeah. That's certainly something to strive for, to be right up there with like, and although I think about it, we've had a lot of people get engaged at the cabin or celebrate or come right
Yeah.
after their wedding. So you can like lump it in together to like, but yeah, to have them really think back on, imagine, oh, we went here on our honeymoon and this is what we remember about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's fun to think about. We were looking at it, just reminiscing. We're 3.5 years in now. The number of guests we've gotten to host over the years. I mean, we're up over probably 1,000 people now, and that's 1,000 little moments that
Yeah.
people get to have. That's outside of our experience at the cabin.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So I do want to go in a slightly different direction because I feel like this is really fun to talk about and it's great to strive for. And as humans who are flawed, there will inevitably be moments where we accidentally, I'm going to assume for most of us it's accidental. None of us, especially for if we're like listening to a podcast like this, there's probably never a moment where we intentionally didn't see someone, but where we accidentally find ourselves in a situation where we don't see someone and kind of fail on that front. I have several that I'm happy to share. I don't want to put you on the spot and make you share something bad, but I'm just curious what we can learn or what we have learned from those moments.
and these are moments where we've just goofed, and I don't think you mean where, um, like we had two guests show up at the cabin at the same time, like not that,
No,
not that.
no. I can share mine first. I was pretty public about this when it happened. This was the 1-star review we got. The situation escalated to a place that isn't really relevant here, and it got really bad. And I don't want to point fingers, but she definitely escalated it in a way that she was threatening reviews and stuff. So the review got removed, but there was a moment in that interaction that taught me a lot. And that was, we had construction happening across the street, and there's a lot of rock around Cozy Rock
Yeah.
Cabin, and they were dynamiting it. And we got word 2 days before they
Mm.
started dynamiting that they were going to be dynamiting, right? So they gave you the heads up, but at that point someone had booked and planned a trip. Like, you can't cancel the
Yeah.
trip.
Yeah.
And we didn't know how bad it was going to be. We don't know if that's one boom, if it's booms all, like, we just had no idea. And she was real good about it at the beginning, and then on the day of checkout, suddenly, like, she was a good sport for a full week, and then at the day of checkout, all of a sudden, this was the worst situation she'd ever dealt with. And there were some back and forth messages, and in that, um she told me that her dad, I'm not going to remember this completely correctly, but I think her dad was on hospice care, and she was living at home with him and one of the caregivers along with her mom. And this was her chance to get out for a
Yeah.
week and have some quiet time. And it gave some additional context to that. And as someone who cared for her mom on hospice, I know how absolutely soul wrecking that experience is. And I did it for 9 weeks, and it was literally almost unsurvivable. And I remember going to Panera one day for 3 hours, and that being like the first time I'd had human interaction. And it suddenly gave all this context to her stay. And I felt like I had failed miserably at seeing her in that moment and what she needed from us, right? She was being a good sport, I think, because she wanted to make the most of it. But when I had ordered headphones or done whatever, those were small things in the context of what she really needed, which was peace and quiet. And I look back and I don't know what I would have done differently to find that information out sooner, or even once you find that out, at that point it had gotten pretty ugly. And the other thing, she was really bullying me pretty severely because I am public. I'm on Instagram. She knew things about my life and was
Yeah.
using a lot of them in a very mean way. Um, but that doesn't change her reality, what might have led her to do that, right? And it just made me wonder, like, how do we find those things out ahead of time so that we can be more sensitive? And if it's when, like, I don't know. I don't know. I still am learning from that one. Could I have asked a question along the way? Maybe I should have said, like, what would really fix this for, like, what is your best case? In the best case, what outcome would you want? I don't know. I'm open to your thoughts, but
If you ask that after the fact, like after she's left or in the middle of her stay.
like, the first moment that she communicated maybe about the dynamite, she accused me of belittling it or minimizing her concerns, which, looking back, it was really hard to see because she was laughing the whole time. She'd be like, LOL, like, I just went to a good bookstore in Portland, like, no biggie. That was kind of how it was presented to me until the last day. And so I didn't escalate it because I didn't know, I don't think, how
Yeah.
severe it was and how I could have uncovered that sooner, how we really learn what might be going on. Because I just feel like it was such a gross oversight on my part of being able to see her human experience in that moment until it was too late and it had gotten bad. I
Yeah.
think about it a lot.
You're also looking at it in hindsight, right?
Yeah.
You have the benefit of knowing the full situation now, and she humans are fickle creatures, right? We all communicate in a different way, and we change our mind often. And it sounds like her way of communicating with you and letting you know there was an issue was to not hit it head on and say, "Hey, there's an issue here," but instead to subtly drop a hint to you. And I guess she felt like that was enough.
Yeah. So how do we figure that out?
So your job as the host or the hospitality guru is to read through those lines and to go, well, this person may be saying LOL, but maybe that's their nervous tick about
Yeah.
how they respond to something. Um, I don't know what you could have done different, Janice, but maybe just trying to read through those lines of communication to see what she was really saying maybe would have been helpful. Hey, I hear what you're saying and it's not a big deal, but is it really?
Yeah. Even going further back, maybe this is where, when we ask, "Are you celebrating anything?" maybe I should phrase that differently. Is there any additional insight you could give me on your stay that might help me customize the experience? Because I had another one recently where it turns out at the end, I found out they had discovered about a grandmother's death while they were there, which they wouldn't have known at the beginning.
Yeah.
But I think some people might go to grieve too. We assume celebrations, but what if it's actually the flip side of that? How, and if we have a space where we're learning of that sooner, maybe that could have helped. I might have had that information going in, which then the minute I heard of Dynamite, I might have been like, listen, let me book you another place. Let me reach out to my Freeport community and find
Yeah.
another place for you, right? If you have that information.
If she had been that forward with it, and
Right.
she probably thought she was heading to a place like that.
Right. Right. And not knowing. I think it's always about the questions, how ask always leading with questions rather than solutions. I think I jumped into solutions there, ordering a noise machine and headphones and thinking that that would solve the problem, but there was so much more there that I didn't ask about.
Well, and I don't think you did anything wrong, and it's easy to kick yourself after the fact, but I think it's a testament to the kind of experience that you want to create, that you're now a year past this thing and you're 2 years past this thing and you're still kicking yourself over it, you know?
Well, and it's relevant here, I think. I mean, I hope this, I'm not trying to like ease my feelings. I'm really just trying to dig into how do we see people in good times, and I think it highlights what happens if we don't see them.
Yeah.
And how you can go from the best experience someone has ever had where they remember it alongside their engagement to perhaps she's going to remember that trip and it was not a good one. She will tell that story of a horrible, you know what I mean? And so that is almost that's how high stakes it sometimes feels, being able to really see what's going on and see the humans that we're hosting, even though we often don't ever see them in real life.
It's tough. I mean, it's tough because you don't get 5 minutes with them. You get a few
Yeah.
messages.
Yeah.
And if I could encourage the guests to share and communicate more than just checking in, can I get an early check-in?
I
You
know.
know, and if you can share a little bit, maybe we can, you know, celebrate you a little more
Yeah.
or mourn with you a little better or
Yeah.
customize your experience in a different way. And the reality is a lot of hosts, at least in our space, that are making themselves known on Instagram, do care about your experience
Yeah.
and don't just care about maximize profits for
That's
my
right.
returns.
On my 12 doors. I think
12
you're
doors.
right.
Yes.
But then I think about my own Airbnb experiences and the percentage of hosts where I feel like if I had sent vulnerable information about myself, that they would take that and run with it. And it's very low. I'm not
Yeah.
saying they aren't out there. Our community, it highlights how special our community is. I think they
Yeah.
do exist, and I think there could be more of them the more we talk about these things. But I do wonder if I was like traveling to LA for a video shoot and I told them like all the details, they'd be like, okay, whoa, too much
Yeah.
information.
Just traveling for business. Please don't take care of me in a special way. I don't
Right.
want to use my one special one here.
Right. That's right. Or maybe I do. If you're traveling for work and you're treated special, I mean, isn't that could be powerful too, because
That's true.
work travel can be exhausting. Spencer,
That's
I
true.
don't want to take up all of your time because obviously this is a work night and I'm very grateful for your time. Any other pushes or any other key things that we haven't talked about yet that you really wanted us to touch on before we
Hmm.
wrap this up?
I I don't know. I feel like we've had a lot of good conversation. I would encourage you and anyone to understand what it is you're trying to create, what experience you're trying to create in your mission statement, whatever you're going to call it, the purpose of your cabin existing. Write it down and then go hard after that.
Yeah.
Limit down what you're trying to do to create that experience. I'll leave us with this like little moment in Will's book, which obviously I just finished reading because I'm excited about it. He talks about, so Will is created the most amazing restaurant in the world definitively because it was, that award was given him 11 Madison Park. Uh, in his journey to create the number one restaurant in the world, he talks about visiting all of these restaurants over the course of years. And he visited the top 50 restaurants in the world. And he got to the point where he felt like it was just one restaurant trying to outdo the next and trying to outdo the next and trying to create the most elaborate, extravagant, wowing thing that you've ever seen. And then at the end of some year of him doing that, he sat down and he's like, it feels like it's too much. It just feels like we're losing the purpose of what we're trying to do here, which is to create a space that creates human interaction and human engagement. Like that's the purpose of our meal. For him, it's a meal, is to create that place of human interaction and engagement and not showcase how amazing I can cook this tilefish. And it changed how he ran the restaurant and made it more about human engagement with the person you're there with and with your server so that we can have a genuine moment. Yeah. And I think it's easy to get lost in cabin world, Airbnb world, to have all of the amenities every time. It's so easy to get lost in that.
Yes.
To forget that you're creating this unique experience. And if you can write down what kind of experience you want to create and why you're here, the purpose of your build or the purpose of your stay, it'll help guide what you're trying to do and maybe help you narrow down so you don't feel like you have to create something that's for everyone.
Yeah. And isn't that more exciting and more fun than scrolling Instagram and saving the things that you're like, okay, I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll do this, I'll put them all together. Instead, you're looking deep into yourself and saying, what do I care about? Yeah. What lights my soul on fire? And how do I share that with other people?
Voila. That's all you got to do. Just crack that and you'll be fine.
Yeah. Thanks, Spenser. It's always great chatting with you about this stuff.
It's awesome chatting, Janice.
Thanks for taking the time.
Talk soon.
Bye, friend. Thanks so much for joining us, and if you liked what you heard, feel free to leave us a 5-star rating on Spotify or share some of your favorite parts over on Apple Podcast. If you have feedback or suggestions for the future, you can also find me on Instagram at Cozy Rock Cabin. Looking forward to next week.